Dude, never did it.
Welcome back to Never Did It. I'm Brad Garoon. I'm still just a guy who likes movies, and I'm here with my buddy Jake Ziegler. What's up, Jake?
I'm also a guy who likes movies.
It's so good to like movies and talk about movies. It'd be a real shame to do this podcast and not like them.
Absolutely.
But I think a lot of podcasters who do movie podcasts actually don't like movies.
It seems like that, doesn't it?
It does. This is not one of those podcasts. This is a podcast where we each assign the other a movie, one for each of the last 100 years that the other person hasn't seen, and then we talk about them. And this week, that year is 1995. And I assigned Jake the movie Heat, which I could not believe he hadn't seen. It is like such a Jake movie, and he hadn't seen it.
Yeah, I said that to a friend of mine who has been listening to our podcast, and he said, what's what's coming up? What movies have you done? I said, well, I actually just watched Heat last night, and he said the same thing. He goes, I've never seen Heat, but I can't believe that you've never seen Heat. So yeah, it's a shocker.
It's insane. So the reason Heat was such a big deal when it came out is because it was the first movie since The Godfather Part 2 that cast both Al Pacino and Robert De Niro, and it was the first movie ever where they would share the screen at the same time. Because Robert De Niro, as anyone who listens to this podcast probably knows, and if you don't, you should know. You should see Godfather 2. It's one of the. It actually is one of the best movies of all time. It just is. You will like it if you see it. I promise. It's not one of those movies that's like slow and suchy. Anyway, De Niro is in flashbacks. He's playing Marlon Brando's younger self, and of course, Pacino's character wouldn't have existed yet in that timeline. So they share the screen here very briefly, but in a pretty incredible scene. And I think it's safe to say, unless you're a huge Irishman fan, that this is the best that they've ever been together.
Yes, I think so. As far as them being together, yeah, that one scene that they have together is phenomenal. I really like The Irishman, actually, too. And I think the movies are pretty close, quality wise. Like I really like both of them. I think they're very good. But yeah, boy, that one scene they have together in the diner is just that's just dynamite. Yeah.
So they have a second scene together, but they don't talk. They're stalking each other in the climactic scene of the movie.
Also, really well done.
Yeah, that scene in the diner is wild, and it's very famous. But I am not a huge fan of The Irishman. I think it's kind of bloated. The CG takes me out of it. Doesn't make me any less excited to see Killers of the Flower Moon, which at the rate that we're releasing episodes will have long since been released by the time you hear this. But I actually also think that while Heat is great, it's maybe not as great as Michael Mann stands would have you believe. But I don't want to poo-poo on it just yet. Tell me it's clear why I assigned it to you. It's De Niro and Pacino really together for the first time. It's a crime epic that a lot of heist movies and crime movies have lifted from since then. What did you think of the movie Heat?
I did. I really enjoyed it a lot. I think it's very cool. It moves along really quickly. I mean, it's almost 3 hours long. It's about 2 hours and 50 minutes, so it's lengthy, but it moves along really well. I think a lot of the supporting characters are also really good. Of course, you've got Pacino and De Niro leading the movie. Classic kind of conflicted good guy. You got a conflicted bad guy. Sort of thing. But then you've got all these really kind of interesting supporting characters too. You've got Val Kilmer, who's got his whole subplot going on with his wife, who's played by Ashley Judd. They've got kind of an interesting subplot going on. And you've got some of the other side characters they have too. There's a really, really interesting subplot that I kind of wish I had seen a little bit more with one of my favorite character actors, this guy named Dennis Haysbert, plays the cook who De Niro recognizes from when he was in prison with, and then he kind of recruits him back, kind of back into his fold. Dennis Haysbert was in Major League, which is a comedy that I love, and then he was also the president in the first season of 24, which was a really good season of TV before that show completely turned to crap. So I always enjoy seeing him in movies too. So yeah, really good supporting characters. There's a couple of just knockout action sequences in the movie. There's a big one downtown after a bank robbery goes bad. That goes on for a while, but just moves real quickly and is just really compelling to watch. There's a lot to like about this movie for sure.
I put myself through the torture of watching Michael Bay's Ambulance. You cannot. So this is another thing where I feel like the world is trolling me because there's been a huge swath of people who are like Michael Bay's Ambulance is actually quite good. No, it isn't. It's a nonsense movie that is incoherent, and outside of Jake Gyllenhaal screaming, which is always entertaining, there's nothing to this movie. But it's very clear watching Ambulance that Michael Bay is a big fan of the movie Heat. A lot of it pulls from that bank robbery scene. That scene is amazing. A couple people that I want to point out that you left out because this cast is bonkers, especially by today's standards. Natalie Portman just in it as a child actress.
Oh, that's right. I didn't know that before I started watching it either.
Yep, she's Al Pacino's. Is it his stepdaughter or his girlfriend's daughter?
Because they're married. Yeah.
Okay, so his stepdaughter who.
Yep.
And one of these conflicts that he has with his is that her dad is a loser and she's kind of a troubled kid, and it just adds more stress. So he's the point of the movie is Al Pacino is really stressed out.
There's one thing in his life that he's good at. He's only good at being, at being a detective. He's not a good husband. He's not a particularly great stepfather. He's not really good at anything else. And that's what they talk about really in that diner scene is how he's talking about like, this is the only thing I'm good at. And then De Niro looks right back. He's like, this is the only thing, that I'm good at. They're both like just kind of resigning themselves to the fact that like, this is how it's going to be. We're not changing.
And it's interesting because you can tell they like each other because they relate to each other. And that's what makes their cat and mouse game so interesting.
There's a respect between, even though they're on completely opposite sides. Definite respect there.
Hank Azaria has a small role in the Val Kilmer subplot because he's having sex with Ashley Judd. That's the deal.
Yes, he is. Yep.
Right. He's great. Nice little comic relief.
Says the famous line to, but how she's got a great ass.
Right.
That's who he's talking about. He's talking to Hank Azaria when he says it. Yeah, I can't imitate it. I don't even want to try.
That took me way out of the movie. One, because you've heard it 100 times, but two, it's like, what are you doing? What are you doing?
Well, it's so funny to see Pacino do some of that stuff in this movie because earlier in our podcast we covered The Insider, which is another Michael Mann movie starring Al Pacino, where he's really subdued and really doesn't have these like freak out Al Pacino moments, and he's got a bunch of them in Heat. And it's just interesting to just kind of compare those two performances because they're both very good. They're just very different.
Right, and then you've got De Niro, who is playing it so straight in this movie, and he's incredible here. This is one of my favorite De Niro performances, and he's got a subplot with Amy Brenneman, which plays into the he's not good at anything either, because it almost seems like this is the first woman he's really had a relationship with. He does not know. He's got a great apartment. He's really interesting, but he does not know how to relate to this woman. She's she works at a bookstore.
Yes.
She's so cute. I can't get over how adorable she is in this movie. And it was interesting because I watched this and then I actually, so to be fair to you, I only saw this movie for the first time 2 years ago.
Okay.
And I'm watching it and thinking, what happened to Amy Brenneman? And then right after that, she pops up in The Old Man, the TV show with Jeff Bridges and John Lithgow that was awesome for 2 episodes and then totally fell off a cliff. Yeah, real bummer. She's in that and she's awesome in that also. So I was happy to see her back, and she's still hot. I don't really have. Oh, that's what I was going to say. So Pacino plays it totally straight in this movie, opposite Amy Brenneman.
De Niro.
It is De Niro.
Yeah.
And it got me thinking about his role in Copland, where he gets to have the Pacino outburst when Stallone finally comes to him to ask for help. He's like, "You blew it! I can't do anything. My hands are tied now." It's a great scene, but it was pretty weird. I was like, he's having some Pacino fun in this scene.
Yeah, definitely.
But we've both seen Copland, so that will not feature anymore in this podcast. Yeah, I love this movie. But because it's a Michael Mann movie, there is a bit of like emotional remove. I felt that way when I watched Thief. I felt that way a little bit when I watched The Insider. I never feel totally emotionally connected to his stories. I think I said this when we were talking about The Insider. And for that reason, I don't like Heat as much as some other people do. And when people talk about Heat 2, which is a prequel that is a book that Michael Mann wrote and is now allegedly going to be a movie starring Adam Driver in the De Niro role, I'm not that excited. I
felt there was one part where I did feel a little emotionally attached. And it was, and I feel okay talking about this because again, this is a 30-year-old movie almost 30-year-old movie at this point. So I feel like it's okay. De Niro says this earlier in the movie. I think he says it in the diner scene where he says, not to get attached, or his whole philosophy was don't get attached to anything you can't walk away from in 30 seconds or less. And then he goes on to have this relationship with the Amy Brenneman character, and it seems like he's finally attaching himself to something, and he's opening up to her, and they really got something going on. And then at the end of the movie, he does it and he walks away from her. He looks right at her and he turns around and walks away. And that, like, I felt that hurt me actually. Like I was even though I knew like he was going to do it, it still bummed me out.
It's a very cool scene, and the movie doesn't work if he if he walks towards her in that
Right.
moment. I thought the scene was staged kind of oddly. I'm like, no one else sees him here. There's tons of people around. And then they have this moment and then he walks away. Whatever. You can't be, that's just picking nits. I could see being emotionally attached to that scene. I watched it and I was like, that was the right thing to happen at that time. But I never felt that emotionally involved in their relationship because one, she shouldn't have been with him. He's a bad dude. He's a good person. He's a bad guy.
Right.
It worked out better for her that he walked
It
away.
did. I mean, definitely, yeah. But it was just, I think it speaks to the movie being just well done. It was the right choice, for the movie and everything. But yeah, I felt that a little bit for her.
Fair enough. Anything else you want to add? Let's talk about Val Kilmer a little bit in his role, which is, this was a huge role for Val Kilmer. And one of the things that I've heard people worried about in this, we're going to make Heat 2 as a prequel kind of thing, is that story is told from his character's point of view, as like he's remembering things back. So they got him in Top Gun Maverick, but it's not really his voice in Top Gun Maverick.
Right.
And I don't think that was easy for him to do. I don't see that happening. Now, I'm not saying they can't make this movie because they'd have to change the framing device, just change the framing device. But it's not going to be, spoiler alert for a 30-year-old movie, it's not going to be De Niro's character doing the
Right.
thinking back on his past life. This is a podcast about Heat, not about the potential for Heat 2. What I do think is so interesting, though, is that Michael Mann wrote it as a novel before writing it as a film.
That is an interesting tactic. Yeah, I didn't know that. I didn't really know much about that until almost it was out or something. I think Kevin Ford was the first one that I heard it from mention it. So yeah, it's an interesting strategy. I can't think of any. It may have been done before, but I'm not familiar with it, with that being done in that way.
Is there anything else that you wanted to mention about the film Heat?
I mean, just that, if you're like me and haven't seen it for whatever reason, I mean, set aside 3 hours and check it out. There's a lot of great stuff to like about it. And so you'll probably recognize things from it that you've seen in other movies. You're like, oh, that's where they got that from.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. And it's Pacino and De Niro in some of their best work, really. So yeah, really, really loved Heat. I gave it 4.5 stars out of 5. Probably. I don't have top 10 or top 20 lists for 1995, but it would easily be in the top 20, if not the top 10. So certainly one of the best that year.
Cool. I gave it 4 stars. I liked it a lot. It is in my list, which I'll talk about more after we talk about this next movie, which you assigned me.
Yes.
Tell me why you gave me the movie Muriel's Wedding.
Well, I was really excited to give you Muriel's Wedding. This movie is my wife's favorite movie, just absolute favorite movie of all time. And when we first started dating, that's the kind of thing that comes up when you first start dating. Like, oh, what movies do you like and everything. And I remember she was a little bit like, well, I kind of like this movie. It's this movie, not one was really seen. She had to do all these qualifiers before. It's like, is this movie called Muriel's Wedding? And I knew this movie. I was familiar with it because I studied film in college, and I had taken a class on international film from all different countries and things. And when we did a unit on Australia, and we had watched this movie, so I had seen it probably just that one time. So it wasn't my favorite or anything like it is hers, but at least just the fact that I knew the movie, she was really impressed, and I think that was a good beginning for us. So so that was that, and I really liked it too. Is the other thing. It's just a really good movie. Toni Collette, it's before she had come to America, and gotten famous doing The Sixth Sense and some of the things that she had done over here. Really good performance from her. It's a really interesting movie. It's different than a lot of the movies made in America. They're similar genre. We had watched it recently. My wife and I had just revisited it recently, so it just seemed like a good one to share. It's a little less heavy than Heat.
Yeah, I'd say. Although it does have its moments.
It's emotional. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a turning point in the movie that's quite heavy, I would say,
Right.
Near the end. But yeah, I adored this movie. I gave this 5 stars. I was
wow.
Yeah, I was so taken by this movie. First off, Australian and New Zealand comedies, they're weird. Sometimes they're really bad. When they're good, they're so good. And this one was so good. And this, I think, is the oldest one I've seen now. Incredible. So a little background. My sisters and mother have always been obsessed with this movie. I grew up hearing ABBA nonstop, 1, because of this movie. This movie has a total ABBA soundtrack. And 2, my grandfather really liked ABBA. When certain lines came up in this movie that I've never seen before, obviously, I was like, oh, I know that line. You're terrible, Muriel. I've heard that so many times in my life, mostly because my sisters and my mom were obsessed with this movie. Now I know I should have been too. And what I wrote when I was watching it was, sometimes when you watch movies from your childhood, part of the reason you love them is you get a feeling, like a nostalgic feeling, for what you felt watching it as a kid. I didn't watch this movie as a kid, and I had that feeling anyway. Amazing. What more could you want?
Yeah.
So yeah, this movie is about a troubled young woman who is a social outcast. She has a group of friends who are like the popular women in her small Australian town, but they're not nice to her. And then they ostracize her from their group. They're about to go on vacation to Sydney or somewhere near Sydney. No, not Sydney, to some island.
Yeah, somewhere fancy. Yeah.
Yeah. Or actually, I think it's supposed to be like the Australian version of Cancun. I don't know if it's really fancy. It's kind of
right. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
And she goes anyway on her own because she's a lunatic. And she's also a kleptomaniac. She steals a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So she steals money from her folks to go, and she does it under the guise of getting a job that she got with the help of her father and her father's connection. Her father's this like douchebag politician, and her mother is a doting housewife and they're all pretty dim. Her whole family's pretty dim. And she gets to this resort, and her former friends are very unhappy to see her, but she makes a new friend, which is another girl that she went to high school with, who's a wild child. And their bond is really the centerpiece of the movie and is what I love the most about the movie.
Love them, love her so much. Yeah.
Amazing. She's like the Australian Juliette Lewis, this woman.
Yep. Yep.
She's so good. And the scene in the movie that hooked me is Muriel gets to this resort, and all of her bully friends are doing like a talent show. They're singing in a talent show, and they're all wearing sexy coconut bikinis and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Muriel's watching on, wishing she could be as thin and popular as them. And then later on, after she connects with this woman, and this woman berates her bully friends and reveals that one of the friends is having an affair with the other one's husband, so that they hate each other. Now this group has infighting. They do a very cheesy 70s knockoff ABBA performance. And this is after Muriel's ex-friends have said that listening to 70s music is lame. You see Muriel's like very nervous about doing this performance. She never says she's nervous, but you just see it in her performance that she doesn't feel comfortable doing it at first. She's pretty standoffish. And as it goes on, as she sees her friend having fun doing this, she becomes more and more and more confident. And then these evil women start physically fighting each other during the performance. And Muriel loves it. And it becomes this huge, and everyone who's watching it is having a great time. And it just, you as an audience member, just fall in love with Muriel and her friend, whose name I can't remember right now.
Yeah, Rachel Griffiths plays her, and yeah, just the two of them, they have amazing chemistry right away, and it's the kind of friendship that you absolutely believe that these two have this connection right away, and it does. Yeah, it completely carries the movie, and it's the reason that it works as well as it does.
Totally, it is the emotional through line of the movie. Muriel. So I don't want to spoil anything else because it's a comedy, and not that the plot points matter so much, but I just want people who haven't seen this, because it is a bit. So we're doing this for 95 because it came out in the States in 95.
Right.
It came out in Australia in 94. So it's actually on my 1994 list. Oh, wait, no, it is on my 95 list because I'm abiding by these rules. But if you haven't seen it, I don't want to spoil too much. But basically, Muriel steals a bunch of money from her family, goes to move in Sydney with this friend, and stuff happens. Some of it as a consequence of Muriel's lies, some of it because Muriel's insane, and it gets big. But the thing that always stays important is how is Muriel getting along with, what's her name? Rachel Griffiths.
Rachel Griffiths is yeah. Yep.
How are these two getting along? Because their happiness rises and falls with how they treat each other. So heartwarming, so nice. There is one potentially triggering moment near the end, but it's important for the movie, and it's important for Muriel's growth, so she can see the error of her ways. She's a totally flawed protagonist. Like, you're not always rooting for her, but
right.
Also you are, because everyone loves a loser, and she's a loser.
She is, super flawed. But I mean, she tries so, she just tries so hard. You just want it for her so badly.
Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, and Toni Collette is just, she's just phenomenal. I mean,
incredible.
She's incredible, and we're going to cover another one of her movies later called Hereditary.
I'm not happy about that.
I know, but we'll see. We'll just be able to compare the two. Just the disparity in the performances between those two things, of the range of what she can do.
Yeah.
In that movie is she's just she's phenomenal, and I just love seeing her in this because she's I rooted for her the whole time, even though when she's doing something that she shouldn't be doing, or like something that's going to blow up in her face, it's just like, oh, I want it for her so badly, but she's going to screw it up.
Yep. And then one day we'll look at her performance in Mama Mafia and see what we think of that.
Right.
Or Mafia Mama, whatever. I actually don't think it looks that bad.
Yeah, I'll see it when it's streaming somewhere.
For sure. Yeah. So 5 stars for me. I loved this movie. I don't think that you get Bridesmaids without this movie or any of these modern groups of women. This is like, I mean, maybe you get them, but Muriel's Wedding is such a great template for the down on her luck, misguided, but like good-natured female character. And honestly, if movies aren't influenced by it, they should be, because it's just so good.
Well, it could even, you could even have male characters like this too. I mean, compare Muriel to Andy from 40-Year-Old Virgin. A guy who, I wouldn't say he's like as flawed. He doesn't steal and from his
No,
parents.
but he's lying the whole movie.
Right. Yeah. And, he has these, this relationship, the relationship with the guys, and he has a group of guys versus like one individual friend. But I mean, I could see some comparisons between Andy and Muriel in the way that you root for them, even though, he does things that are not getting him towards his ultimate goal also.
Totally. So the humor is a little bit more offbeat in Muriel's Wedding than it is in any of like the ABBA movies. And that's because of the sense of humor, the Australian sense of humor. If you want something that's a little bit closer to that, I mean, Hunt for the Wilder People or Eagle versus Shark. Those are movies. I mean, any Taika Waititi movie really is a little, before he came to the States, is a little more on brand for that. But these characters have a bit more, they're a bit more emotionally grounded than the sort of cardboard cutout, very funny characters in the Waititi movies.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, these feel like real people, and it's really rewarding. And when you get to the end of it, you feel like you spent that time with them, and then you feel like it was time well spent.
Yeah. The only semi-spoiler alert that I'll say, or semi-spoiler that I'll give, is Muriel does get into a really non-traditional relationship with a man near the end of the movie, and he, against all odds, falls in love with her. And this all happens within like 15 minutes. It's not like the main, like we've been saying. It's really about her and her friend. It's really about Toni Collette and Rachel Griffiths. It's not about what happens between Muriel and this man. But the fact that he falls in love with her so quickly is perfect, because you fall in love with her quite quickly when you're watching the movie. And when he's not in love with her, you're like, how?
You're right. Agree.
So before we go, I want to just real quick talk. I think we should do this for the more recent movies. Now, you said you don't have a 1995 top 10 list or top 20. I know you keep a top 20. I don't have a top 20 because I only keep lists of movies that I gave 4 stars or more to. But I do have a top 11 or top 12, actually.
Top 12. Okay.
So I'm going to go through it real quick. At number 12, I have Casino.
Great movie. Yeah.
At number 11, I have Heat. Now I'm going to upset you. At number 10, I have Tommy Boy.
Oh, okay. Well, wow. Over Heat and Casino. Okay. That's a choice.
I don't like gangster movies as much as other people. And as much as I liked De Niro playing a Jewish guy, Once Upon a Time in America is a great movie, and I think it's better than Casino. At number 9, I have Get Shorty.
Love Get Shorty.
Yep. At number 8, Goldeneye.
Great one. R.I.P. Tina Turner.
R.I.P. Tina Turner. At number 7, Strange Days.
I've not seen that movie, so that's, yeah.
It's on Max, and you better get to it.
I will get to it. Yeah, I will.
R.I.P. Tom Sizemore. At number 6, I have 12 Monkeys.
Great movie. Yeah.
Yeah. At number 5, I keep the Bruce Willis train going. Die Hard with a Vengeance.
Great movie.
Number 4 is Clueless.
I love Clueless. Yeah.
Number 3 is Muriel's Wedding. Number 2, Toy Story.
Fabulous movie, of course.
Can you guess what number 1 is?
Number 1, 1995. Can't think of it.
So the only hint I'll give is you introduced me to this movie.
Oh, wow. Is it no, it's not The American President, because you don't like Sorkin.
Nope. I thought the movie was solid. I liked it, but not.
Yeah, I like that movie. Gosh, what did I introduce you to in 1995?
I love that I don't like Sorkin. All right, time's up.
Time's up. Yeah, I can't think of it.
Number 1 movie of 1995 is Before Sunrise.
Oh, Before Sunrise, of course. Yeah, I don't know why I wasn't thinking of that, but yeah, that movie's amazing.
I always think of it, which is why it's my number 1 movie of 1995.
Yeah. Gosh, there's some great ones in 95. I might go back now and try to cobble together some lists of that, because I should have some lists for at least the mid 90s.
Yeah. So for future episodes that are in the 1990s going forward, I will have a top 20 list. Some of those movies probably won't be that good, but I will have it. Okay, so that's it for 1995. We had a great time with 2 great movies. Thank you to each other for recommending them to the other. Next week we'll be back with 2016 with 2 movies that could not be more different from each other.